panel one is Professor Des Laubscher, who is the founder and CEO of the African Institute of Interior Design Professionals. Des is also one of those people who honestly has such a passion and such a drive for design, not just professionally, but really the difference that it can make in the life of every South African and really every global citizen. And I think listening to him is always inspirational, and I'm sure that you will enjoy this panel discussion immensely. So I now ask Professor Laubscher to please introduce his topic, his panel, and also to take a moment to recognize and introduce our former First Lady of South Africa, Gugu Motlanthe. Thank you, Des.
Thank you, Vicky. Today we're going to discuss the design education and the future qualification of design, which is we're very happy that's happened. And I think there are a lot of people on this panel and in the audience that are very excited about that. And I think that what I found really interesting in the first hour this morning, and I love it, is that we suddenly see the power of innovation and we see the power of design and how important this is to our country, and it's finally actually been looked at seriously. So the creative industries are a key factor in the future of this country, the future of employment, the future of where we're moving. So I'm really quite excited about what's happening. And you're quite right, Vicky. This master plan to me is a game changer, and I think it's going to change a lot of perceptions about where we're coming from. And I also love to be proudly South African. And I think that's something that we should all appreciate, is that, you know, it's not just about proudly South African product, it's about being proudly South African citizens. And if you see the fantastic things we've achieved on all levels in this country, it's quite phenomenal. So without getting into any more further waffling while I'm getting all excited about where the country is moving, I'd like to introduce you to our first lady, the Honourable Gugu Motlanthe, who is also, well, she's the former First Lady and a trustee of the Juliet Motlanthe Foundation. So Gugu, if you could unmute and show us who you are, I would appreciate that, while I just give a little bit of your background. Gugu, I've known now for two or so years, and even more than that, but we've worked so extensively with young girls in the townships across South Africa, and the programs that the foundation does are quite phenomenal, and she's the driving force behind that. And I tell you what, we do 3-day workshops, but Gugu is not the kind of person that comes in and waves her hand, gets applause, and walks out. Gugu is the person who stays there, listens, takes notes. She really is engaged with what happens in those audiences and engaged with the girls. And she shows her the empathy. She understands the workshop. She understands the importance of these things for these young women. But she's also been involved in many things for the foundation. She's the executive trustee of the foundation, and she runs all the foundation's programs, and her energies are focused on development and capacity building. And talking about all the things that you've heard this morning, this is a prime example of someone who is absolutely, completely committed and is passionate about improving the quality of life for all in South Africa. And I'm very happy that we're working with her. She's also has worked on a project called the Organization Towards Integration for the Incorporation of Visually Impaired and Blind Learners into Mainstream Education. And it shows too that passion and that understanding and that empathy for everyone in our society. And not just the normal people, but for the people that have disabilities, that actually need special needs and special care, but how we integrate them. So it's very exciting. And then not only does she do all of this, and believe me, she's all over the place, she's very dynamic, but she's also studying more at UNISA at the moment. So she just keeps herself involved, and she is a complete and utter activist on all levels for the ANC and for South Africa and for everyone. And Gugu, I'd like to, welcome and thank you for being with us today. It's really a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Des. Good morning, everyone. Program Director, allow me to acknowledge the following institutions and agencies: the South African Furniture Initiative, the Department of Trade and Industry Competition, proudly South African. Today, we assemble out of sheer gratitude and pride for the furniture design qualification that has just been introduced in tertiary institutions and the second South African Furniture Initiative Forum. I commend the various bodies for driving this phenomenal program, including the Quality Council for Trades and Occupations, Sector Education and Training Authority, and the South African Initiative Forum. The furniture design curriculum has been in the making for years, and today we are reaping the fruits of the contribution of the many experts and architects of this qualification. The focus of this panel is the furniture design education and the new furniture design qualification. To add furniture design qualifications in South African universities is a progressive step to open the scope wide for the youth to prosper, a first on the continent, and can be a game changer for Africa to be on the world stage with contemporary furniture design flair. At the very core of the qualification is to prepare a student to operate as a fully fledged furniture designer, ready to work in the professional world. The broad scope of expertise required by a qualified furniture designer is a testament to why this qualification had to be accredited. The furniture designer skills and training, prototype and production are highly specialized skills that this qualification will enhance. The need to be proficient in maths or mathematics attests to the gravitas of the qualification. This qualification is designed, amongst other things, to empower students to analyze production forecasts, eliminate superfluous tasks, improve efficiency, and to be cost effective. The qualification also shows confidence in the country's capabilities to drive the initiative and promote the industry with fellow Africans to achieve inclusive and sustainable growth. Now, all that is left is for a private-public partnership to fund students for this qualification. I see many students grabbing the opportunity. It is my hope that the furniture designer qualification will be a positive force on the whole spectrum of furniture manufacturing and sales. This new learning opportunity is also a new career path for our young entrepreneurs or young generation, thus lighting a fire under innovation and entrepreneurship. The South African Furniture Initiative and the Furniture Design Qualification has the potential to nurture the values of empathy and the A in STEAM for jobs of the 21st century. The forum is ideally placed to cultivate and foster a generation of young designers with a mentality and attitude towards their work, which will make a difference in society and the natural environment. Good design is for the many rather than the few. This platform and the new qualification have an important role to play in leveling the playing field, because no one has a monopoly over education, design, and innovation. We can all do it. A forum like this presents a very unique opportunity to engage each other as the private sector and key government decision makers to collaborate and work in harmony. The qualification is now in place and the students and the youth are ready. Are the universities ready? The pace needs more impetus. We are entrusted with this mission to enable change we so desperately need. We must remember that public education is our greatest pathway to opportunity in South Africa. We need to invest and strengthen our public universities today and for generations to come. In this qualification, students are being invited on a journey to explore how they can design and create beautiful products, services, and culture, stuff filled with optimism that it lifts us up. You will be blown away with their designs. Wait and see. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Gugu. I think you've set the tone and the quality of that speech is phenomenal. I really thank you for giving up the time to be with us today and for being involved with this forum. I'd like to introduce my panel before we continue. But before I do that, there's just a very short video that I'd like to show that is a little bit of an inspirational one, talking about makerspaces. And there are so many in South Africa that are really quite phenomenal. And we're looking at the possibility of having partnerships with these kind of spaces with this furniture course so that we can actually really move ahead and make the thing happen a lot quicker than if we have to sit back and wait for funding, etc. This might be a quick fix for the moment until we can actually get into the nitty-gritties. But we'll talk about that later with the panelists. But I'd like to just show you this quick clip. It's 2 minutes. Do we have sound?
More and more of these shared workshop spaces or maker spaces, hacker spaces are appearing all over South Africa and Africa. Basically, it's spaces where people can share tools that they normally won't have access to, or have access to space and expertise that they can't readily access. And it's a great way for small businesses and entrepreneurs to get going and get a foothold in the industry. Here at the Maker Station, we offer a whole range of services. We've got workshop spaces that people can book, studios, we've got laser cutters, CNC, we've got electronics area, 3D printing, and then downstairs we've got more of the analog workspaces. We've got a metal workshop. We've also got a wood workshop, sandblasting, and we even have a foundry where we do some basic metal casting work. The type of startups we see here range a little bit from the guys that run small craft businesses that basically just moved out of the bedroom into the next phase of their business growth. We also have, on the other end of the spectrum, a lot of tech startups that come and access some of the more exotic tools, and with our technical staff, as you work through your project, we assist you to deal with equipment, deal with materials, deal with technologies, get your project from A to B as efficient as possible.
Right, thank you. I think that again just gives us a bit more inspiration. It's amazing how these stations have developed across the country, and I think that is a further proof that Africa, you know, when we need to do something, we do it. We are the most innovative people in the world, not because we want to be, but because we have to be in many instances. So having said that, I'd like to introduce the panel, and I'd like you to just unmute your mics, my panel, so that we can actually start the conversation. And the first person that I'd like to introduce is Mugendi K M'Rithaa, who describes himself as a transdisciplinary industrial designer, educator, researcher, and is currently at Machakos University in Kenya. He's a specialist in pivotal design thinking and advancing the design agenda across the continent. And he's associated with a number of international bodies, and he is the first African president of the World Design Organization. And that is quite a huge honor for us in Africa. And Mugendi, that made me think that, hey, you and I've got something in common. I was the first African to be president of the International Federation of Interior Architects. So we've got two on the continent, which is great to know. He also works and focuses on many projects, and his aspirations are for young designers worldwide. And Mugendi has spent a lot of time in South Africa, and now he is from Kenya originally, but he's put his footprint back into Kenya, but the way that the world has changed, we can have him in the same room with us, thank goodness. So welcome. Nice to have you on the panel. I'll move on to the next person that I have on my list. Good to see you. Is Angus Campbell. He's a qualified industrial designer with a master's degree and over a decade's experience of lecturing, researching, and a freelance designer as well. His research focus on sustainable innovation is the nexus of social, technological, ecological systems within the complex South African context. Angus, at this point in time, is also the head of department and senior lecturer at the Faculty of Art and Design and Architecture, the Department of Industrial Design at UJ. And he's also the co-founder and co-ordinator of the Design Society Development DESIS Lab, which he heads up with the local design section. He was a co-founder in Zidabi Zokulda, which is Conversations About Food project, which focuses on innovation in Soweto's food system. I need to introduce you to somebody else who's doing a similar project with your engineering department. So Angus, that's a separate conversation. And he's a board member, was a board member of the Museum of African Design, Momo. So he's again has a wealth of experience. He's busy studying for his PhD, and welcome Angus, and thank you for taking the time to be with us as well.
Thank you for the intro, Dave.
Juliet Kavishe is a professional interior architect. Over the course of her career, spanning 13 years and 2 continents, Juliet has worked as an interior architect in projects that focus on high residential end and commercial and corporate projects. A self-proclaimed self-minimalist, Afro-minimalist, she brought her personal ethos as an ambassador to the African Institute of Interior Design Professions, and she is also a contributor to the Pan-African Design Institute panel as identifying African design, and she is now on the editorial panel of the Pan-African Design Institute Publications Committee, and has recently been appointed as one of the directors of the IID. And this is another one of those transcontinental people. Juliet was born in Tanzania, now lives in South Africa, but she's also worked at the Guggenheim in New York, and she brings a wealth of experience to the table. And I must say, is also an incredible public speaker. Daryn Molenaar, who is also with us, is an industrial designer by trade and educator by profession, and as he calls himself, a tinkerer at heart. He's been at the Cape Peninsula Technicon for the last 15 years of University of Technology. It was the Technicon 15 years ago, so that's not such a bad slip, and has supervised over 100 BTech industrial design students. Darryl has the pleasure of teaching across the world in design, and he's passionate about interactive design, and he talks about his current focus, which on medical device field with Salzburg University and Applied Science and Management Center in Innsbruck. So Daryn again is, as he sits at the moment, is a lecturer in product and industrial design at the Department of Design at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. So, and then Clifford Moleko has been teaching at the Tshwane University of Technology for 13 years. So we've got an incredible, you know, if we put all these years together, hey guys, we've got such a panel here. It's, it's quite phenomenal. He's been teaching for the last 13 years, and he championed the new 2020 HQSF aligned curriculum, which was rolled out this year. He has served as a program coordinator previously for 4 years, where he was entrusted with delivering the curriculum to ensure success rates continue to improve. His responsibilities, apart from teaching, still lie within curriculum development and support of the staff of the department. His future goal is to be a curriculum specialist within the interior design, teaching and learning space. So we have, and at the moment, he's lecturer and coordinator at the Tshwane University of Technology for integrated learning coordination. So that's our team. And to fire the first question, I think before we get into the education stuff, I would like to just ask Angus a question, because it's something that I think came up this morning, which is really quite important, is how do we deal with China? How do we actually, why are we actually interested in having this course? And we're going to introduce furniture design when we know that we have a problem with China. And it's something that a lot of people ask. And I think that it's something that I would like to say, or are we just wasting our time? Or do you feel that we need, is there somewhere and somehow that we can actually take this a lot further? And I think I know the answers, and I know you know the answers a lot better than I do.
Thanks for the question, Tez. I mean, I don't think it's an easy answer. I think, you know, in terms of China's manufacturing capacity, I think even in terms of their design capacity and the amount of design schools that they have, you know, we can't really compete. But I think that's really what it's all about, is actually not trying to compete on the same sort of terms. It's about actually really seeing where we can find different niches in the market. I think it's not even that, you know, only China that's a problem. I mean, I think if you look at the sort of Italian furniture manufacturing industry, it's also massive. And I know that a lot of sort of local furniture production companies, what they do is they import componentry that comes from these companies that can really afford to put sort of millions of euros and in the Chinese sense, millions of yen into the production of tools, because they can do these things en masse. So I think the key thing is really sort of identifying how, as a South African, and ultimately sort of, I suppose, being at the foot of Africa, you know, we can really produce products that are going to be possibly slightly different in the way that they're produced, possibly not as mass manufactured, possibly you know, exploring more sort of batch production technologies and techniques. And I mean, I think this is also an area, for example, we've got a current PhD student who's exploring how do we actually develop more locally attuned production capabilities, you know, instead of, you know, I suppose teaching our students, you know, manufacturing techniques that they're probably never going to be able to see in the South African context. So it's about working with the skills and the technology that we have, and I suppose, you know, using funding and appropriate resources where we can to expand. But I think at the same time, to try and think that we can be producing the bulk of furniture, you know, in the same way that China does is really problematic. I think that's on the one side, but then I think on the other side, it's really about embracing what it means to be a South African furniture designer, which is about doing furniture design in a very different way. It's about embracing our own sort of visual aesthetic. And I think it's some ways, you know, my own previous master's qualification was looking at, well, what is this thing called African style? And it's somewhere between. It's somewhere between craft and it's somewhere between mass manufacture. It's something that combines the two and becomes something like truly unique. And I think that's only something that we can do in the local context. And so it's really about kind of exploring these opportunities that we have, as opposed to saying, oh, well, we just can't compete, because then we're going to get nowhere.
Mm. Yeah, I think it boils down to, in a silly way, it's almost like in the 90s when the Spanish started competing with the Italians, and there was a real quirkiness about Spanish design in fashion and in furniture, etc. But it was a distinct personality that it had, and I think that that's something possibly that we must look at as where we are in context and in Africa. So Mugendi, I would also want to pose that question to you. Because I think you've got a wealth of experience on this continent, and how do you see us actually moving forward with our ethos, our design ethos in terms of furniture design?
Thanks, Des. And I first would like to concur with Angus. I believe that there are three components of any production or manufacturing to play on the global stage. Just summarize it basically in three words: speed, scale, and sophistication. I think when it comes to speed of manufacturing and the scale of manufacture, China happens to be in a unique lead. On the other hand, when it comes to sophistication, as Angus mentioned, if we do batch production, we can actually do highly sophisticated pieces. But the bottom line has to be quality, because I don't think if we come up with work that we can all, just because it comes from Africa doesn't mean it should be of any lower standards in terms of finishes and in terms of the quality of materials that are used. Notwithstanding, I think it's also important that we celebrate the authentic inspiration that comes from the continent. We've mentioned it before. We've seen people like Peter Mabeo and B.B. Peck and many others on the continent who have adopted unique, locally inspired ways of looking at furniture, and also tapped into the indigenous knowledge of those places that they're working with. And the world seems to be ready to embrace Africa. We've seen it in music, we've seen it in food, and we've seen it in fashion design, among others. So people know, and they do actually want to engage with Africa. But for us to engage as equal partners in this space, we need to be the first ones to support our own creativity. So I was very happy to hear about the Proudly South African initiative, because that's where we need to start. Proudly South African, and I'd put South in parentheses so that it's actually proudly African. If we mobilize the African resources and led by South Africa, because South Africa obviously has many advantages, being a very sophisticated economy in its own right, and having the most diverse economy, and actually being the leader in production, then we can actually have that as a vanguard of a new wave of African design, and that will be taken seriously. But if we scatter our efforts into our 55 or so countries on the continent, I think we may lose something. Some of our countries are far too small, and the economies are far too small to compete globally without some form of collaboration and coalition. So maybe that would be the first thing. We need to support and believe in our own design inspiration, so that we can actually start to then hold our heads high as we play on the global stage. I think China has also realized, in fact, that right now they're looking at something called Design in China 2030. So they're also moving away from manufacturing as their ethos or their identity, and realizing that the power of design, because of value add, is far greater than just merely manufacturing. So maybe we can also take a leap from that, and this program around furniture design anticipates that it's about design, and that production follows design, not the other way around. Thanks.
I hear you, and I must say I saw that when I was in Schengen last year, that you know, they really have become very sophisticated in their design thinking and the way that they move in. But I think, as Angus said, you know, there's so many design schools, and there's so much quality, and there's so much money, and we really need to be, as you say, we have to be innovative to actually move forward on that level. So I'd like to get on to the next question. I'm going to involve quite a few of the panelists here. And maybe I can start with Juliet. What can make our furniture design courses unique? And I think we've already heard that from Angus and Mugendi, that the way that we're going to move forward, and the way that we can move forward, is that we need to have an identity. And maybe it's not just a South African identity, as Mugendi has said, but it's an African identity. And maybe this is a Pan-African design thing that we need to start talking about, that we need to speak to a lot more on the paddy board and on the panel, and on the people that we are involved with now in Africa. How do you feel, Juliet, about this? What will make our courses unique?
Thank you, Des, for the introduction earlier, and thank you to SAFI for this, opportunity to talk about design, and specifically furniture design. Des, that's such a beautiful question, and it's quite poignant in the sense that I think South Africa has been in the forefront, and it's quite inspiring to see this proudly South African banner across the board in all industries. And now we're specifically talking about design, and the fact that there's already a platform there that's pushing South African design. The fact that we can focus on furniture design and kind of direct it in that way. But then also the rest of the continent, we can kind of look to this and say, well, why don't we then have a proudly African banner, made in Africa, made in South Africa, made in Liberia, made in Ghana, made in Kenya, and have these as kind of stamps in our furniture products. So one way of, kind of like tossing ideas here is we start with how we teach design. Across different design disciplines, we go into the history of design, and maybe we touch on European styles that then influenced, were influenced by Asian styles and vice versa. Why don't we talk about the history of African design? And I love that Angus spoke about kind of drawing the line between craft and manufacturing. I think the continent is very hands-based. We are a creative continent, but it's sometimes perceived as craft as opposed to actual design. In the simplicity of a form, in the simplicity of the function that that product needs to serve, therein lies the beauty of design. And if we teach that, if we incorporate it into our syllabuses from high school way into university, therein lies the uniqueness of what this program can provide. If we then take it further and say, look, there are beautiful Ashanti stools that can then be modernized. You have product designers like Jomo Furniture, who's an Ethiopian designer, who takes influences from, similar influences from West Africa and East Africa. You have beautiful product designers, Saba, they're based in Kenya, and they take their influence from the traditional Swahili design language. We call it design language now, but it's actually a lifestyle. So if we incorporate that into our education systems, into our curriculum, we will then produce a truly unique African furniture curriculum that will set us apart globally. And I think therein lies our power, therein lies our drive, therein lies our proudly South African, proudly Kenyan, all the African countries. We can then put that unique stamp on it.
Mm. Great, yeah. I must say it's a strange thing, but what's twisted in my head is when I go to Woolworths and I'm looking for grapes and I see they're imported, I look and I see they're from Spain, I decide I'm not going to take these, I'm not going to have them. But ironically, if they're from Egypt, which is not that far away from Spain kilometer-wise, I'll buy them because I feel like I'm supporting the continent. So it is quite a strange thing. So Daryn, I'd like to pose that same question to you. How do you see what could be that makes this a unique course? How could we drive this to really promote South Africa, promote Africa, and put us on top of the world?
Hi, Des. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I just want to echo what Juliet said. I think as South African or African, I don't think there's just one identity. I think there's many identities. And that's partly one of the struggles to create this proudly South African identity or African identity. But there's also opportunity. I think if we look at many of the iconic designs out there, it's always an iconic design that's got a very strong narrative behind it, a very strong story why it was created, who created it, where it was created. And I think as an educational platform, the furniture design program can also focus quite heavily on that, saying that we understand that that furniture design, there's manufacturing, there's design, but let's also step it back and let's say, why are we doing this? I think in itself, that becomes quite a unique offering that we can do. I like the idea of mixing craft and manufacture because let's face it, it's very similar. It's maybe just a scale that's different. And that can also be a cornerstone in the way that we approach what we do and how we can differentiate ourselves with other people as well, or other programs out there.
Great, yeah. I think it's summing it out. And another thing that I was sharing, which was really quite interesting, is, we talk about all this massive machinery that we need, but they had a chair that they put together with, it was like a jigsaw puzzle. and it was 3D cut on a laser printer, but the whole thing clipped together and became this massive chair, which was really quite a beautiful object, and it worked. It was just one of those incredible things. Okay, then just moving on a little bit, and this is a question again, Angus, I'd like to put to you is, are you at UJ prepared to offer furniture design as a course? I know that's a very boom in your face question, but how do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, in a sense, Des, we've already been offering furniture design since we opened 50 years ago. So, you know, a lot of our, you know, as an industrial design program, a fair amount of our graduates end up in the furniture design industry. And I think that, yeah, so I mean, yes, I think this is the clear answer. I think that I think the limitations of being able to offer furniture design are going to be with regards to the equipment, as you were talking about just now. I think that you know, finding programs that are sufficiently resourced to be able to have enough equipment to be able to train from sort of very basic sort of hand skills through to the sort of three-dimensional laser cutting, CNC machining, etc. That's going to be where I suppose government intervention really needs to take place. I mean, at the moment, you know, in terms of industrial design, which I think at the moment, in terms of a qualification, is probably the best positioned in terms of being able to like move into a furniture design specialization. We only have 3 programs in the entire country. And I mean, when you start comparing that to, I don't even know how many 100 programs they've got in China, you know, this is where the problems start coming in. And I know that, you know, there have been quite a few of the South African higher educational institutions that have thought about offering industrial design and have gone against it because of the kind of resource implications that it would have. And I think the other difficulty in terms of teaching these sorts of skills is that, you know, again, in our kind of COVID crisis, as we start to realize that sort of governments are, you know, tightening the strings when it comes to higher education subsidies, etc., that again, design and particularly very hands-on practical education requires expert educators, and also it requires a very one-on-one kind of teaching modality. So you end up with classes no bigger than sort of 20 to 30 students. You can't have a classroom of 200, 300 students, which you can in some of the other sort of sciences, for example, or engineering. So, I mean, I think these are limitations, but it doesn't mean that, you know, they're things that can't be overcome. And I think that, you know, for example, that video that you played with that amazing makerspace, you know, these are opportunities that sort of higher education can then link with industry, and that, you know, those resources are in place. And there are lots of examples of that. Also where the governments have also set up furniture resource centers like FernTech, for example. There's also the Sarsveld tech center as well. So I think that these things can be overcome. And yeah, I mean, I think in terms of being able to offer such a program, yeah, we would definitely be on board in terms of a furniture design specialization.
Mm. Yeah, I think you're quite right. I think that UJ has, you know, from the product design, industrial design side, it's a key component of your course in any event. I know just from Design Center, we do a lot of lighting design, which is on a far smaller scale, but, you know, that could also be channeled up, I guess. But I'm sorry, I've just got to go back to Clifford, because I've asked all the institutions if they would run, how they would actually do this furniture design to make it unique. And from your perspective, coming from TUT, Clifford, how do you feel you would be able to run a course like this?
So thank you very much for the opportunity. I must say I actually jumped when I was told of this forum. So at TUT, this is a conversation we've been having for quite some time. I must say I also love the video of the makerspace, and some of the issues perhaps I can highlight before I respond, or as I'm responding, would be how do we teach design, or how do we teach furniture design? And do we have the infrastructure or the facilities? Because a lot of what we teach ends up on paper. So what is the value of teaching these skills if none of the products are ever imagined in real life? And with that said, who actually must be responsible to create the content? Which then also brings the next question, the staff complement that we have. With all due respect, can we actually, do we have enough experience to actually venture into such an avenue? So to answer the question, yes, we are interested. We have been for a very long time. And we are happy that something of this nature is actually slowly taking shape. But in addition to that, as a young academic, I'm always concerned with the question of, after I acquire a qualification, what do I do afterwards? So there's also a question of employability and also entrepreneurship. So what would then be unique, or rather, where would the focus be? Am I being trained to be employed, or am I being trained to be an entrepreneur? As soon as I get my certificate, what happens to me?
Okay. I'm actually going to throw that one back at Mugendi, and I'm going to say, how do you see mentorship programs possibly happening in this instance, and possibly also across all design disciplines? It's not just about furniture design. It's also, I think, about industrial design, product design. And I think Angus could also come in on this one and just give us a bit of advice. Well, anybody, if anybody wants to put their hand up, because it's not a, it's just a question I've suddenly worked out. Again. Mugendi? We seem to have lost you.
Has followed a kind of an apprenticeship model where understudy.
It's a very bad line. Was it just me?
Is a master, and maybe part of what this.
Vicky, can you hear?
No, Des, I think the connection is quite bad. Perhaps we could come back to Mugendi and pose the question to some of the other panelists.
Okay, is there anybody else that... Mugendi, sorry, it's a very bad line. We can't hear you. So we're going to ask anybody else if they would have any idea. Angus, I'd like to, I think we've discussed this in the past about mentorships and possibly...
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, mentorship is an learning from people that have gone through the. Mugendi isn't getting the message. There we go. No, it's just gone completely. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, learning from somebody who's an expert in the industry is key. And I think, you know, that in many ways, you know, some of the problems with industrial design is that you kind of, you're a master of all. No, you're a jack of all trades. And, you know, so to become we can be masters of all as well. But, you know, it's, to become a furniture designer, you know, you really want to know, sort of have deep sort of expertise. I mean, furniture design in itself is an incredibly complex undertaking because in many cases you're dealing with a whole lot of different types of materials. I think really where the art comes into furniture design is also how these parts and different materials fit together. And, you know, so you actually have to have quite a good sort of technical background in order to be able to, you know, undertake, you know, even if it's just wooden furniture, for example, just the skill that's required there is significant. And then when you start sort of opening up manufacturing techniques, you know, then the level of expertise and the diversity of expertise becomes even broader. Yeah. So I think, you know, partnerships with industry is incredibly important. I think that a lot of our graduates who have left and gone into start their own sort of furniture businesses have learned a huge amount in the particular sort of avenues that they've followed. And we bring them regularly back into our program to come and do lectures for the students. But I think that, creating such mentorship programs is key to being able to get that expertise from the people that kind of have the hands-on practical experience, which is not necessarily exactly the kind of expertise that academics have. And I think that's, again, as the complexity that was highlighted by the previous speaker, that actually trying to find the right sort of people to kind of teach these sort of furniture programs is quite complex. And really what you do want to do is you want to make sure that, as was said, that the graduates are going to go into jobs. So, the idea of, even not necessarily just a mentorship program, but the idea of almost like a furniture guild kind of approach is also one that we could look at, where you work under, experts. That's really kept a lot of furniture industries alive, particularly in Europe. So, that kind of a model is also quite interesting, and it could be one that doesn't necessarily sit within existing higher education institutions, but that can then be distributed within the industry itself. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I must say that, that really answers the question. And then Mugendi, sorry we lost you. I don't know if you can you hear us now?
Yes, I can. My apologies. Maybe
we can hear you.
I should have spoken ill of the lack of face-to-face contact. I think the gremlin must have reacted to that. So I heard what Angus said, and I totally agree. I think the role that SAFI, in partnership with Pan-African bodies like PADI, the Pan-African Design Institute, could have chapters around the continent where the master furniture makers could play the role of actually complementing the academic program. This was the beauty of what Philip Holm was doing in the video that we watched on the makerspace, because when students learn the practical aspect or the theoretical element of what they need to do, and then the university workshop, it tends to be a much more perfunctory or functional approach to making. But when they go to Fab Labs, what has been observed is that they actually have fun. And I think this idea of form following fun needs to be incorporated into our thinking. If we do not experiment and go beyond the normal boundaries of our thinking, if we're not willing to push boundaries, and this is what I like about much of the Italian furniture design, is very experimental, very whimsical, and very playful. And out of that comes new trends and new, ways of combining and rehashing materials and forms. So if we can have this, we can support these Fab Labs and other maker sessions to become a complementary element for the learning process of our students, where they engage with professionals who are out in industry. I think it's a win-win. And we can have this kind of model replicated across the continent and then share best practices through continental platforms like PADI. Thank you.
Yeah, super. Thank you. Okay, then just moving on. Juliet, I'd like to, there's another question that I have down here, is that, do you think that when we're teaching this course, if we have multiple institutions involved, and we are, as Clifford was saying too, we need to develop this curriculum, should we be working in silos, or should this be an initiative that we work together to actually come up with the best results for the country?
I think that's what you said, the last bit of your statement should be the driver. Coming up with something best, the best curriculum for the country. And this, whether it's the country, whether it's the continent, whether it's country specific, I think we should be more collaborative. I think also, I think Angus spoke about it. I mean, the beautiful video we saw earlier about that amazing maker's space is also an opportunity for collaboration between industry and educational facilities. And if several educational institutions commit to using a similar maker's space, we're collaborating in terms of how we teach, students get to know each other across different universities. You don't graduate and think you are the only furniture designer. You have resources and a network of similar furniture designers from other institutions all over the country. And I think that network in itself becomes really, really strong in bolstering individual designers and what they want to do. Now, I know various institutions like to have something unique. We have to be competitive somehow in order to bring, you know, more students to your institutions. So, I mean, I think at some point we can't really police the full curriculum, but if there are certain guiding principles and guiding courses that institutions have to have in order to get accredited to offer this degree, then that should be the guiding force. But if an institution wants to add one or two other causes to the curriculum to have that edge, I think we should allow it. There's nothing wrong in competition. And I think it then pushes us further, even as creatives and designers, to explore further and produce better products and produce better, you know, students and produce better designers. But yes, we should be collaborative, but we should also enforce some kind of competition, just to keep institutions on the edge.
I think it's also what Mugendi said, which I really loved, is that the mentorship, you know, that could be a really wonderful opportunity to get to the top designers, the guys that are really on the continent doing stuff that is exquisite and is out of this world, and learning, you know, learning from them, which I think is also very important. I think we've come to the end of our question time. Unfortunately, I still have a lot that we could carry on with, but I think we do have a few questions that we may have to answer. So I'm just going to look at it. Here we have.
Des, we have a number of questions. A few of them we may hold back for the second panel, just because they speak quite specifically about industry concerns. But from the ones that came in, if we could get your input or some of the panel's views, there's a comment from Guinevere Pedro that asks, what are we considering around the concept of quality standards, especially for export, as the standards are not consistent worldwide, can be very costly, and is somehow missed when design is applied. So a question around quality standards in the course in production, is that something that the panel considers important? And if so, what would be ways to implement this or make sure that it is considered?
Okay, I think this also talks about the supply chain. You know, if you have to produce 100 pieces of furniture or 100 chairs for a restaurant that's opening in 3 weeks and your capacity is one a day, it's not going to happen. So I think it's a very good question. Would anybody like to take that one on? Anybody? Angus?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the quality, I think Mugendi touched on this. I think even Daryn spoke a bit about it. You know, it's a balancing act. And I think, like you've also just mentioned, you need to be able to take on work that you are able to actually plan forward, in a sense, in terms of your capacity. And I think that has actually been a problem with a lot of sort of South African manufacturing, is that people take on jobs that they actually can't achieve because the opportunity seems, you know, so lucrative. But then in the end, all they do is they end up sort of rubbishing their name and not actually meeting the potential outcomes that the client is looking for. And then, you know, that then also then leads the client to start looking elsewhere. So, I mean, I think that's a key part of actually setting up the curriculum itself, is getting, is the entrepreneurial aspect of a furniture design course. It's understanding, you know, what your capacity is. It's understanding the kind of cost of materials. It's, you know, all those kind of basics of sort of business management that really need to be in place. I think that, you know, this isn't necessarily about getting furniture makers. It's about getting furniture businesses out there. And I think, you know, one of the aspects of our program has been very much about making sure that the one theoretical base that all of the students come out with is business, business administration, business management, etc. So I think that would be core. And I think that that's how you achieve quality. It's quality education in terms of, making sure that the students themselves are coming out with an appropriate qualification, but it's also making sure that what they're able to do when they leave is going to be able to lead to quality product. In terms of standards and assessments, etc. I think that also needs to be a partnership with this program itself. If it's going to be supported by government, we need to get the SABS on board to help with reducing costs for standards certification. And we also need to find ways of being able to internationally certify products if we're looking at an international market. And I know that again is something that can come at quite a significant cost, which a lot of SMMEs just really can't afford. So I think it's a multiple tiered sort of thing, and we need to be looking at it at all different levels. But I think quality is something that in itself has to be what's the word? It's flexible. So, in the sense, if you're buying a particular kind of a product that's very cheap, you're going to expect a certain type of quality. So that has to come together in terms of the cost of the product as well.
Mm. And I think it goes another step as well, because as you've said, and that's another thing that we've got to be very wary of, is that we have this proudly South African, but if you start producing furniture that falls apart after 3 months, it suddenly becomes, well, I'd rather go the Chinese route because it's not working for me. And it's the same thing I had when I was a child. We used to have this made in Japan. It wasn't even made in China. It was made in Japan, and it was complete rubbish. And look at how that's developed, how that's changed. So it's a case of that confidence of knowing that we are capable, and that must actually come in. I think the other thing with the curriculum planning is that this is something that really is going to take a lot of work from here in, until this course is introduced. And we need a lot of industry input into that as well, just so that we're not designing in ivory towers. I think that's very important too. Okay, let's have a look and see what other questions we have. Vicky, have you got another one for us?
Yeah, so thank you so much, and thank you for the answer, Angus. We have a question that again could tie in a little bit to practice, but it does have an implication on education. And that is a question again from Olivia Pedro, looking at the mastering of materials. A note has been made that it could be a big challenge, and that actually having mastered materials could play a huge role in the success of a furniture designer. So just some of your thoughts around, I would imagine that the practical exploration of different materials, the range of materials, and how this could be included in a curriculum.
Clifford, would you like to give that one a bash?
Yes, so this basically comes back to what I had mentioned in our environment, where we don't necessarily have the infrastructure. We've noted that over the longest time, the use of a materials library, or the need for a materials library, is very crucial for all our students. We've got quite a wide range of students with diverse backgrounds, so what you see as a material on a picture is very different from how you experience it in a real life, especially life size. So for something like this to happen on our side, again, as I mentioned, we would need to have a fab lab of some sort, so that students can really engage properly with materials, because as is, it's a nice to have, but we would first need to actually find a building to house all of these items for us, because we do have limited studio space, so there's quite a bit of money involved to get this up and running.
Can I just jump in there quickly? I think part of what furniture design in the past has driven really interesting products is this idea of being in the forefront of technology, and the forefront of material technology. I think part of the curriculum should definitely focus on the science that governs technology and processes, and how to push the boundaries of those. I think everybody's seen wooden furniture, but about 60, 70 years ago, plywood furniture was all the rage because it was a new type of process and a new type of material that people were trying to push the boundaries of. And I think in a curriculum like this, that's definitely, it will have to be core to the educational offering that we will do.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think it's, yeah, that's great. Vicky, I don't know if we've got time for any more questions. I see we've
got. I think let's make time just for one more question. Just to remind participants that if your question is still on the open panel, it may be because we're holding the question back for the second panel. So please don't feel nervous that your question won't be answered. But for this panel, it's a bit of a comment, but also it would be nice to hear your thoughts. The question comes from Inga Weber, who wrote this in response to Clifford Moleko's remarks to say that South African institutions should collaborate internationally, yet apply an African ethos to what we learn internationally. And I think this ties in beautifully with what Juliet was saying about, kind of the language of design to a lifestyle of design, and what does that look like from an African perspective. They reference the Chippendale School of Furniture in Edinburgh as a fantastic hands-on, practically relevant furniture design course. How would you feel about setting up more international engagements with institutions? Do you feel that it's relevant? Do you feel that academics should collaborate internationally and then apply that kind of locally, regionally, and nationally? What are your thoughts on that international collaboration?
Daryn, I see you jumping up and down.
I think that's 100% true. I think not being in, like they said, our little ivory tower, I think that we are doing the best in the world and everybody should just bow down. I think if we have the opportunity to collaborate and learn from other people, learn from other institutions, learn from other cultures, and then apply that learning in our situation, I do think that the quality of the offering that we can give will be so much richer. And also not just that, I think the exposure that the students will gain in understanding design, but also design principles and design theories, not just based from what we do, but from what other people have done. I think that could definitely be a wonderful way forward and something that could make the program that we do incredibly unique as well.
I think I can take that a step further, and I could, we have a lot of exchange programs, and I think it's something that's maybe it's because of our colonial history, but we always we're always inclined to move to Europe for advice and for exchanges, whether it's lecturers or students or whatever we might do. But I'm suddenly realizing that I want to actually start exchange programs with Mugendi. I want to start exchange programs with Felix in Ghana, and let's learn from each other as well on the continent, because then it becomes really quite specific in terms of where we're moving. So that's just a little add-on to what you're saying, and I think it is very important that if we get this going, we should actually make sure that it starts on the right foot, and it starts with a holistic approach to what we're trying to achieve. I think it'll be absolutely fantastic, fabulous. I don't know if, Mugendi?
Yeah, thanks, Daryn, for sharing that bit. Daryn is a buddy from many years back, so my apologies for getting too cozy. I agree completely. I think every major projection, economic or even technological, kind of suggests, points to Africa owning the 21st century. So rather, to put it differently, that the 21st century is an African century. So there's obviously mobilization of resources and even goodwill towards things African. I think part of South Africa's soft power, if I can put it that way, as one speaking from the rest of the continent, is you've got this incredible asset base and also raw materials that actually is a microcosm of what the rest of the continent is about. we need to start to see how furniture design, among many other design-related fields, could start to add value to our natural resources. We've got the steel, we've got the petroleum, so we can produce all these plastics, titanium on the coast of Kenya. So we've got the materials, but we need to start to mobilize design as the tool that actually adds value to our natural resources and therefore start to uplift our economy. And so the idea of using the material library, I agreed with Clifford. Maybe we need to collaborate far more with manufacturers and the commercial side of what we do, so that as they develop, like the way DuPont does things in the US, it's got collaboration with so many universities, so that every time a new material comes out, they would start to share that so that the universities can help either co-create that new material or even propose ways of utilizing it. And I think Daryn would remember that for a very long time, Zanita, which is, makes the corrugated board, collaborated with CPUT to see how they could push the material to its logical conclusion. And that was very, very productive and became a staple for our students and our staff when I was down at CPUT. So I think the role of industry needs to be really tapped into, and we need to start to see these raw materials that Africa is rich in as the basis to moving this continent out of poverty and into prosperity. And just to reference what Des said at the beginning, so this is my last comment, that Africa isn't poor, it just doesn't have a lot of money. But even saying so, because Africa has so many needs, we should be a superpower in innovation. So we need to link everything we do to innovation and technology, because this is where things are happening. Africans are naturally hackers, and the hybrid model of manufacturing and thinking, akin to the Indian Jugaad kind of innovation, needs to become something that we embrace and actually celebrate. Because you can see it right across the continent, people hacking and rehashing and reconstructing. And this is the basis for us now moving to something far more exciting as you think about furniture design and other fields in Africa. Thank you.
Des, I'm going to take some liberties and I'm going to pose one last question to the panel and to you. And it's a question based on a comment that came in from Numvula Tati, who speaks about the link between training and building a curriculum and a qualification around entrepreneurship, as well as training students who can be employed within the industry. So I think there is, there are two sides to that. To what extent are we hoping to bring entrepreneurship and a marriage of business and design and production into the space? But also, are we seeing some of these courses fulfilling the need of the existing industry in graduating students who can be active and really versatile members of the existing industry? So just your thoughts on that.
Okay, I think, Angus, I'm going to call on you again, because this is a discussion that we've had with, the furniture manufacturers and working closely with you, Jay, and what you've actually achieved over the years with that. So if you don't mind, if you could actually give us a little bit of the background to what you did and how you did it and where it's gone and where it's going, because I think it's an introduction to what we really want to achieve with this course as well. As we've said right from the start, it has to be relevant, and I think we must acknowledge the country we live in. We need to actually know that not everybody has the luxury of being able to study full time, but there might be other avenues that we can actually use to allow them to have access into education, or have access into mentorship programs, or have access into some kind of learnership that happens in industry, through the CETAs or whatever it might be, which is already established through SAFI. So I don't know, but Angus has I think he's got some really good stories to tell on this one.
Well, I mean, from our own experiences, I mean, we've already been focused on training designers. And generally those designers go out to start their own businesses. And I think that we've had some very good success stories in that. And we've also had, some failures as well, where students sort of overextended themselves in an industry that wasn't able to support them. Yeah, I mean, I think it's about having a diversified strategy, exactly like you've said, Des. And I mean, you know, I think the way that our institution is structured has a very particular focus. I think it's very much about making sure that the entire industry is supported through an educational, through various educational approaches. Having these sort of 3 different streams, as you talked about, the idea of sort of learnerships, mentorships, and then sort of more higher educational offerings allows people from very diverse backgrounds the opportunity to get into furniture design education. And I think also, you know, one of the key limitations of getting students into our programs is bursaries in the first place. So, I mean, I think even looking at, you know, being able to provide talented students the opportunity to move between the streams so that there is actually articulation would be very beneficial. So I think it has to be a multi-pronged approach. It can't just be, well, this is exactly what we're going to be doing. I think it's about working. I think Daryn and both yourself made the same comment that we can't be sitting within these sort of ivory towers. You know, for example, you know, UJ is, he offers sort of university-based qualifications. CPUT is focused on diploma offerings at the moment. So, you know, these are slightly different kinds of offerings. TUT is exactly the same. So they are putting out, you know, slightly different types of students. And I think it's about embracing that sort of diversity and also being allowing people that are part of whatever strand of the stream they're in to be able to move across. And, you know, through that, you end up with a much more sort of resilient educational system, and also a system that sort of undoes a lot of the injustices of apartheid. And we sort of start decolonizing sort of higher education in South Africa so that we can really have, I suppose, a much more broad participation in an industry that in many cases historically has mostly been sort of white and very male. So I think that it is also about transforming the industry into something that really reflects the diversity of the South African population. Yeah.
Great. Okay, Vicky, I think we've come to the end of our session. I'd just like to thank the panel. I think you guys have been amazing. Vicky will do a sum up in a moment or two. I'd also just like to once again thank our former First Lady, the Honourable Gugu Motlanthe, for being with us, and she's still with us, which, as I said to you, she's tenacious, boy. She hangs in there and she learns all the time. She's a wonderful ally to have with us. And so thank you all. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great session and lovely seeing all you people, wherever you might be, in Cape Town, in Nairobi, in Pretoria. Another one from Cape Town just arrived with us, Vicky, and Joburg. Right, Vicky, up to you.
Des, thank you so much. I think that the job of summarizing that panel discussion is really an insurmountable task. I think so much was covered, new ground, but also ground that we knew, you know, we had challenges around. One of the key things for me that I think stood out in this discussion is how beautifully, you know, the academic concern and really the academic planning is marrying to the master plan, because it is talking about that, the importance of collaboration. Of really making sure that we have mentorship, that we have discussions, that we perhaps have exchanges to ensure that what we're offering is relevant, but is also leveraging international trends and applications, so that we're training people, we're training students to thrive in an industry that is exciting and that kind of speaks the lifestyle of design, as Juliet mentioned. So thank you so much to everyone that took part in panel one, and also thank you so much for the participants. I have messaged one or two of you privately, just in case you were wondering why your questions weren't being answered. We are holding some of them back for the second panel discussion. But also, if you have questions around some of the topics discussed in panel one, please pop them in the chat, and we will hope to get some of our panelists to send you a response or to answer some of the queries that you may have. If you look look at the agenda for today, we will have quite a short comfort break. We're running just a few minutes behind schedule, but hopefully it's enough time to make sure that you can grab a hot beverage of your choice and just mull over and reflect a little bit on the discussions that have happened so far. So we will meet back with the next panel discussion kicking off at 12:30. So if I could please ask you to be back a little bit before, so just 2-3 minutes before, so that you can check your connection. When you rejoin, please make sure that you keep your camera off and your mic muted. And then we will kick off with a very exciting second panel discussion. So thank you so very, very much. And we look forward to speaking to you at 12:30.